Thank you so much. That was amazing. So I'm proud to introduce the next topic, Deconstructed and Decentralized Future of Work. I'm pleased to announce Ravin Jesuthasan, Senior Partner and Global Transformation Services Leader of Mercer, best-selling author and top 25 most influential consultants in the world, faculty on the future of work automation and workforce 4.0 at the Fast Future Executive. Welcome, Ravin. We also welcome Dr. Alun Evans, CEO and co-founder of Freeverse.io, leading voice on dynamic digital assets, faculty on blockchain and business applications at the Fast Future Executive. Welcome, Alun. Okay. We also welcome Kaushif Shakar, Global HR Leader and former VP and Global HR Head, Operations, former Boston Scientific, Novartis, and GE. Welcome to the stage. So this session, the panel is going to be talking about the future of work and how the blockchain is going to be accelerating transformation. Take it from here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Helena. Ravin, Kaushif, I'm not sure if I told you earlier on that I actually have a new addition to the Evans household in Barcelona. We've got a new kitten in the house. And she's very cute. She's called Athena. And my daughter's going through a Greek mythology phase right now. So, named after the god of war strategy. And like all kittens, her attention span is measured in milliseconds, right? So, she'll be running around, she'll see a fly, she'll jump at that, she'll see something else, she'll jump at that. And sometimes when I look at her, I actually think that she reminds me quite a lot of the business world. Bear with me. Because in the business world, we all like to chase the latest fad, right? Well, the latest technological fads, we like to chase it. And spare a thought then for poor old blockchain. A few years ago, it was the latest fad. VC money was pumping into it, and everyone was talking about blockchain this and decentralized that. And now, of course, it's being usurped by AI, right? So now it's all AI this and large language models that and machine learning, whatever. But I actually think that's quite a good thing. Because it means that the real use cases of blockchain are now free to be developed that are useful for our modern business world. And I'm just going to start today by talking about what I think are the three sort of core pillars of blockchain that actually affect our usage of it in the business world. The first is decentralization. So to recap, we've grown up recently in a Web 2.0 world where centralized services are very important, right? So LinkedIn, for example, is a centralized service. Your data on LinkedIn can be essentially edited or erased by LinkedIn whenever they want, right? Because they have the power. They can change your profile photo for a photo of a chicken if they want, and you can do nothing about it whatsoever. Compare and contrast that with a decentralized system. That's where multiple copies of the data are stored in independent organizations that don't know each other and crucially do not even trust each other. And that comes to the second point, which is trust, right? Or actually a lack of it. What blockchain provides is a way for organizations who don't know each other, let alone trust each other. It provides a mathematically accurate framework by which they can be certain that they are telling the truth. And that's incredibly, incredibly powerful, right? And that leads finally on to the last plus point that I think we have with blockchain is this idea of immutability. And that's particularly relevant for sort of non-crypto applications of blockchain. This idea of the blockchain being this immutable data store that can never be actually edited. It can't be deleted, it can't be edited. Everything you add to the chain of blocks stays there forever. Mathematically, it must stay there forever or the whole thing falls apart. So with that as a quick intro, let's pass on to Ravin now to talk about a few of the sort of applications with regards to transactions and organizations.
Great, thanks, Alun. So before we jump back to this, the one thing I'm hoping that you're noticing is, starting with Dean Williamson, through Effie, through everyone who's spoken, while these blurs may seem discrete, there is incredible connective tissue and a series of threads that run right through them. And you'll see that throughout the balance of the afternoon as well. So in the event someone didn't spot that, I think you'll see some, again, connective tissue. So when Alun and I were writing this chapter, the thing that really jumped out at us was the potential for the blockchain to really power a very different future of work that Dean Williamson started talking about. If you think of how work is evolving from the traditional closed ecosystem of work being done entirely in jobs within an intact, structured organization, into increasingly an open ecosystem where talent and work flow much more seamlessly together, whether that's employees in an organization, gig workers, contractors, the employees of the outsourcer, the use of AI in substituting or augmenting or otherwise transforming work, you start to see the power of the blockchain in enabling that open ecosystem where value is shared much more seamlessly. You get much more cooperative structures rather than a traditional corporation with all of those functions sort of housed inside. And the thing that was really fascinating for us as we were writing this and looking at some of these examples is the potential for this distributed enterprise to have much lower agency cost versus a traditional corporate structure. So if you think of the sorts of behaviors that were talked about as it relates to the regenerative enterprise, the sorts of behaviors that are motivated by platform organizations, you start to see, again, these more cooperative structures. And so that's really the shift from closed to open ecosystems. And the things that underpin the future of work implications as we make that shift were three things. Transactional. I think every time someone talks about the blockchain, you immediately go to Bitcoin, and it's like, oh, it's a commodity that people speculate on, right? And so, you know, the bad rap that comes with it. You are starting to see more use of these tokens being used to sort of enable transactions outside of the organization, the opportunity to bring a more distributed workforce, perhaps a population that's not traditionally banked, into the game in terms of distributing work. The area that I get really excited about is the organizational elements. And as we start to see the power of distributed autonomous organizations, or DAOs, and the potential for organizations to shift towards these more cooperative structures where instead of having a traditional corporation where you have the value exchange of employees, what if you could also, in addition to that, have the opportunity for different contributors to engage with your business model? Talent with different skill sets to engage as needed, with value being shared in a much more cooperative structure. So those three dimensions of the transactional, the organizational, and Alun's going to touch on strategic traceability and verification, I think really start to put a very different spin on the future of work and the potential for a much more inclusive future of work.
Yes, somebody's building a DAO as we speak. It's super interesting. Before we bring Kaushik in with more of the sort of industry perspective, I just want to touch on the idea of traceability and verification, which is a use case that we see in blockchain. And you know, Jessica was mentioning earlier on about how there's a company building, you know, plastics and traceability of plastics. There are large delivery companies, UPS and things like that are using blockchain for delivery. Food chain, cold storage and things like that. Many companies, I think Walmart is using blockchain for tracing of its cold storage. But I want to come up with, looking in the future, right? We're called the fast future, right? I want to come up with a future thing that I wish existed and could exist, right? Perhaps it should exist, right? So we've all got LinkedIn profiles. Everyone's got a LinkedIn profile in this room, I'm absolutely certain. And on my LinkedIn profile, it says, Dr. Alun Evans, PhD in medical physics. How do you know I've got a PhD in medical physics, right? You don't. I could have made it up. I didn't, right? But I could have. And the LinkedIn doesn't know either. LinkedIn doesn't check, right? It has no idea. The only organization that knows whether I have a PhD in physics is University College London. And you're not going to go to the library in University College London and hunt out my thesis to make sure that I really am saying that I'm Dr. Alun Evans, are you, right? And LinkedIn's not going to do that either, right? So wouldn't it be cool if there was a decentralized, open, permissionless framework whereby a university, for example, could say, yes, this person, Mr. Alan Evans, with this passport ID or ID number, whatever it is, has a PhD in physics in 2007, right? And therefore, no one would need to go to no one would need to trust that I was saying who I am, because they could just go. LinkedIn wouldn't even. They could just go and look at that database and be certain that I am indeed who I say I am, right? And so I think this idea of having this traceability and verification is a use case of blockchain, which I think we're going to see more of in the future. And I'm encouraged by the fact that the whole rubbish around speculation on crypto and NFTs and all that kind of stuff, that's kind of passing by the wayside. And unfortunately, I think that's still a lot of people have that in their head as like, that's what blockchain is, right? It's like crypto. And it's not, right? Well, it's one element of it, but it's not the most powerful element. It's not the element that I think will have the most impact on our business world in the next decades.
Alan just touched upon some of those, actual use cases, and we'll probably have a few minutes to talk about some more of those. But from my approach as a practitioner, so I've been the recipient of the wisdom of these two authors, and when I read it, partly with with curiosity and trying to understand, and is it just some esoteric theory that a PhD and a thought leader are going to tell me? But frankly, as I read about it, and you will read the article when you read the book, I felt excited. I mean, if I were to put myself in the shoes of some of the 20-year-olds in the audience, I would feel really excited about the different possibilities and be somewhat liberated, because it portends a world where I could work on things that I really like to work on, at times I want to work in, see a pretty direct relationship between the work I'm doing and the compensation I'm making, see a world where my work is fairly transparently assessed, my performance is evaluated in a more objective and transparent way, and all of that. So I feel excited. And then I step back into the shoes of myself, a man in his 50s, and I'm still excited, by the way, but it is tempered just a little bit with, so what could be the challenges of making this real and bringing this to fruition? And maybe we'll have a minute to talk about those as well. Before I go into from my perspective as a practitioner of HR in organizations, in large organizations for the most part, I just wanted to talk about and share my thoughts about a fundamental thing, which is what this might do. This might do in terms of a decentralized work ecosystem, right? If I were to be able to, if you think about it at its most granular element, it is, you're thinking of elements of work that are there, and matching those pieces of work with talent that is the most suitable to do that work. That would have ramification in terms of your organization model, which will be more fluid, perhaps more stakeholder driven. Your normal models, organization models of what a supervisor does and the management structures, those may collapse and may look very different than what it is today. So before getting into some more specific use cases from an HR practitioner's perspective, Ravin, any thoughts on that piece that you talk about in the book about this increased flexibility, increased agility? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think at the heart of this, and at the heart of many of these blurs, is the opportunity to kind of transcend legacy. The opportunity to sort of have a smaller set of building blocks that we can seamlessly combine and recombine. I think Sangeet talked about that at the beginning. And you'll see that as a bit of a trend and a theme that cuts through many of these blurs. And when you think about a decentralized work system, the opportunity to, in much more agile fashion, engage with talent more and more on their terms, as opposed to forcing them to fit a one-size-fits-most solution that is increasingly becoming no longer fit for purpose, particularly when you think about not just multiple generations, but talent with many different sort of imperatives, talent from many different parts of the world being able to engage with a business model. So again, I think it's those smaller building blocks that get to be recombined with a lot less friction than the traditional building blocks of work.
And maybe if I can just add a practical example, there was a question to the dean in the very first talk today from a young gentleman in the audience who said, right, if I'm an employee, what can I do to help to do things, right? And the answer, quite rightly, from the dean was, like, well, you've got to think about like what's good for the organization and our common goal, and if you frame your request in that way, it's a much more appealing for the leader of the organization. And one of the advantages of decentralized organization is that anyone can make proposals, right? And those proposals gets voted on by the stakeholders, and if it's voted in approval, then the organization does it, right? So it's democratizing that access to democratizing the access to new ideas and essentially crowdsourcing ideas from all of the stakeholders of the entire organization, and not restricting those ideas to the management team who may or may not have the right ideas at the time.
Absolutely. And so, I'm cognizant of the time. So let's talk about some, in this new world, one of the things that is very likely to happen and sort of touch our lives is new talent models. Some of that, are examples that both Alun and Ravin have spoken about. So if you are an employee or even a candidate, just like the LinkedIn example of, your PhD, this is a world where, an individual has full agency of carrying his or her digital identity, professional digital identity, with themselves. What does that mean in practical terms? The employer doesn't have to spend all this time and money. Anybody who's done any amount of recruiting know companies spend time and money trying to verify your degrees, your credentials, your work experience, and all of that. An employer may not have to do any of that tomorrow. Similarly, I can carry my credentials without sort of having to fill out a new form every time I'm applying someplace, or having to justify or sort of prove my credentials. So that's a really interesting and fairly easy to do. One of the first things that will probably happen. It's already started happening. There are one or two companies that have already started working in those areas. The second thing is, payroll and compensation, employee reimbursements, right? If you can link work with talent in a secure, verifiable, through exchange of information that is, in a trustless way, it is immutable. You can't fiddle around with that data. If you are able to match that, right, and execute what, in the blockchain terminology would be smart contracts, right, then you have suddenly, stumbled upon a new world where compensation can be automatically triggered. Employee reimbursements can be automatically triggered. International workers could automatically be paid. Gig workers could automatically be paid. So that would be a fairly interesting. Now, of course, this is an area that would have regulatory challenges. That's my 50-year-old saying, right? But in theory, that's another very interesting use case that, organizations would be able to sort of work on. The third one is a very, decentralized talent marketplace, which kind of links with the previous one, right? You can match talent to opportunities that are, that you have as an organization. And there are a few others, right? Secure employee data management, right? Can you, instead of large ERP systems, can you use blockchain-based systems to do that? Can you have automated training and compliance, right? Where you've completed, I worked for most of my career, I've worked in pharma life sciences, highly regulated environments, right? You spend a lot of time in LMSs, you spend a lot of time not just training people, but also keeping that data. Because regulatory bodies, whether it's the FDA in the US, MHRA in the UK, EMA in Europe, etc., etc. When they come to inspect you, audit you, they would want to also see how well you have trained your employees, the person who's on the shop floor, filling a syringe, right? Working in a sterile environment. And not just how well you've trained them, how recently was the last time you trained, where are your records? All of that, because blockchain is what it is, issues of storing and verifying and being immutably kept, those can be done very differently, probably at a very different cost kind of a model than how it is done today. And finally, performance management would be another area, right? If you can have a system where you're doing small pieces of work, right? You're doing chunks of work, and there is a blockchain-based system where your peers or consumers of your work within other parts of the organization can provide feedback on that work, then there is, again, an immutable chain of verified, information and feedback and input on my work. And therefore, at the end of the year, when the performance management happens, it is not based on hearsay. It's not based on, what a third person has said to my manager. There is a pretty good record which can't be, which can't be played with, can't be fiddled with, that already exists. So those are some of the use cases. Alun, Ravin, any thoughts, any reactions?
Maybe just one thought, because we're out of time. It'll be literally 10 seconds. Is like, it's true that blockchain was invented to solve the problem of virtual currency, right? That's why blockchain was invented, right? Bitcoin was invented, and to solve the problem of double spending in Bitcoin, they invented blockchain, right? And so yes, cryptocurrencies exist, and they will continue to exist forever, and certain speculation on them will continue to exist. But I think the byproduct of that technology has opened up all these amazing use cases that the course it just mentioned, and more to come. So I'm very excited about that in the future.
Thank you so much. I'm sure we have sparked a few questions from the audience. We have limitless possibilities in talent from this wonderful speaking.
I'm in the talent transformation industry. Ravin, you presented at one of our company conferences recently, GP Strategies. Very informative. Where we're entering into, and what we're hearing a lot from the large organizations around the world, is the skills marketplace and the impact of the skills marketplace. And you shared a little bit about how you might transform that skills marketplace. I actually heard Cisco present on this 7 years ago. So my big question is, how do we get there? Because it doesn't seem like traditional organizations are ready or capable of moving in that direction.
Fantastic question. So I'll give you my 2 cents and pass it over to Alun and Ravin. I think there are integration challenges. Interoperability with existing ERP systems is one big challenge. Scalability, can these blockchain-based systems be scaled for large organizations? Regulatory compliance, clearly in different parts of the world. When I read their article, that chapter, I believe there is one state in the US, state of Wyoming, and there is one country in the world, Switzerland, which have made some progress in providing a regulatory framework around blockchain, for example. So those, I think, are, to my mind, would be some of the primary challenges to bringing this to fruition. With that said, in all of these, particular use case areas, there are companies that have already started to work in these areas. I haven't worked personally with any of the systems, so can't say for sure how well they work, but it's a matter of time in my view.
So maybe I'll just pick up on that. So in everything we've talked about, there's actually been progress, right? So we've seen there are a number of organizations that use the blockchain for payroll purposes in terms of compensating a distributed workforce. I think the point about skills is a really good one, because Alun talked about the ability to verify sort of data that can't be questioned, right? Whether he's a PhD or not. I think where it gets really interesting and where you're starting to see the potential opportunity, although it currently exists in separate systems, is we're seeing more and more skill inferencing technology come in. So if I can ally the algorithms that are doing skills inferencing off of someone's previous employment history, off of projects she might have worked on, different teams she might have been a part of, etc., and make that system of record be continuously accretive so that I'm adding on to the degree with experiences, knowledge acquired, skills acquired, etc., you get a stackable set of credentials. And that then follows you around, as we've just talked about. I think the challenge is right now you've got the blockchain, you've got skills marketplaces, and all of these technologies don't currently talk to each other. But the fact that they're there makes the connectivity, I think, something that can be accomplished a lot more easily.
Yeah, and I just had one very quick thing to that. That I agree exactly with what you both said. And I think, but to highlight something that Kaushik said is scalability, something that I'm personally working on very hardly right now. To give an analogy, right? You can think of the blockchain you think of blockchain generally as a global computer. So Ethereum is kind of a computer. You can run anything you want on it, right? Anyone can run whatever they want on it, any software, any program. But to give you an idea of the speed of Ethereum right now compared to what's in your phone. So you can think of the Ethereum blockchain about as fast as one of those old Texas Instrument calculators that you used to do your maths on, like back in the day. And that's more or less the speed of Ethereum, right? Compared to what's on your phone right now that can run 3D graphics and all that stuff at lightning speed. So the issue of scale and sort of, we've seen what's possible, but there's still a long way to go before we can actually get there.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What a great topic. Thank you.